Hello class. Today we're going to talk about changing fractions to decimals. So the first question I have for you today is, how do I change a fraction to a decimal? Well, if you remember, if you think about a fraction problem, let's take 1/2 for example. This says 1 divided by 2. So to change any fraction into a decimal, all we do is divide, because every fraction problem is a division problem. So we come over to the side here and we take 1, because the first number goes inside the house. We're going to divide top in, bottom out, and we'll divide by 2. Well, 2 doesn't go into 1, so we know we're going to add a decimal, bring up the decimal, add a 0, and begin our division. So now we go 2 into 1, nope, it goes 0 times. So 2 into 10 goes 5 times. 5 times 2 is 10. Get a remainder of 0. So 1/2 is equivalent to 0.5. So how do we change a fraction to a decimal? We simply divide. We say the fraction. But what kind of decimals can I get? What are the two types of decimals that you can have? Well, the first type that we'll talk about is called terminating decimals. And a terminating decimal are decimals that end. They're decimals that have a finite number of values or digits. Take, for example, 0.5. That is a terminating decimal. It doesn't go any further. 0.125. It's kind of a long decimal, but it doesn't go any further. 5.9. It's also a terminating decimal. So what's the other type of decimal you can have? You can also have decimals that are repeating decimals. In repeating decimals, a digit or series of digits will repeat. And the way we write a repeating decimal is you write the thing that repeats one time and you put a bar on the top of it. So in this first one we've got 0.6 with a bar. So what that really says is that 6, if I do the division, that 6 is going to keep going and going and going and going, and it just keeps going. Now if you do this on a calculator and you actually use the fraction that would give you 0.6 with a bar, which is 2/3, and you type that into the calculator as 2 divided by 3, the calculator is going to divide that out, but at the end it's going to put a 7, because what the calculator does is it wants to stop working, so it rounds the last digit. Also 0.45, well what that's going to say is 0.45, 45, 45. The 45 is what keeps going because we've got a bar over both of those numbers. Now if you look at the last one, 0.142857, what that one does is 0.142857, 142857, 142857, and so on and so forth. Okay? And that's one of my favorite fractions. It's the decimal equivalent to 1/7. So let's see if we can actually do a few of these. Okay? 3/4. We know that to change a fraction to a decimal, we simply divide. So 3 divided by 4. Well, 4 doesn't go into 3, so we add a decimal, bring the decimal up, add a 0, and begin our division. 4 goes into 3, 0 times, so we don't have to do anything there. 4 goes into 30, well, that's going to go 7 times. So 7 times 4 is 28. We subtract. We get 2 left over, because if we borrow here, we end up with our 2. Well, I still have leftovers, so I add another 0 since we're dealing with decimals, bring the 0 down, and now 4 goes into 20 5 times. We get a remainder of 0. So 3/4 is equivalent to 0.75. 3/4 of a dollar, 75 cents. Same thing. This is a terminating decimal because it's stopped. So what about 1/3? Same thing, put the 1 in the house, divide by 3. So add a decimal, bring the decimal up, add a 0. 3 goes into 1, 0 times. 3 goes into 10, 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. We subtract, we get a 1. Uh-oh, add another 0, bring the 0 down. 3 goes into 10, 3 times. Subtract, 1, add one more 0, bring it down. 3 goes into 10, well, it goes 3 times again. So this one, you'll notice that 3 is just going to keep going. Just keep going and going and going. So the way we write this, now that we know that the 3 is going to keep going, we write the thing that repeats, the digit that repeats one time, We put a bar on it. Some of you have been taught that you write it 3 times, put a bar on all of them. Some of you have been taught to just put dot, dot, dot at the end. But the way we do this is we write the thing that repeats, the digit that repeats, 1 time, and we put a bar on top of it. Okay, 2 11ths. So this one, the same thing. We take the 2, put it in the house, we divide by 11. 11 doesn't go into 2, so we add a decimal, bring it up, add a 0. 11 goes into 20 1 time. So 1 times 11 is 11. We subtract, we end up with 9 left over. Add a 0, bring the 0 down. 11 goes into 90. Okay, well, that one's going to go 8 times, because we know 8 times 11 is going to give me 88. We subtract, we get a 2. Add another 0, bring that 0 down. 11 goes into 20 1 time. We end up with 11. We subtract, get a 9. Do you notice a pattern? So if I were to add another 0 here, I'm running out of room. Add another 0. 11 goes into 9 8 times. So what we find out on this one is that the 18 is what's going to repeat. So we write the digits that are repeating, and we put a hat on it. We put a bar. So we now talked about a terminating decimal, where it stops with a remainder of 0. We've talked about a single digit repeating value, where 1 digit repeats. Okay, we write the 1 number, and then we put a bar on the top of it. But we can also have repeating decimals that have more than 1 number that repeat, such as 2 11ths. We end up with 0.18 with a bar. Okay, so, but in all of those, the way we change a fraction to a decimal is we simply just divide. But what if it's a mixed number? Do you do the same thing? Yes. Okay, if we remember what 4 3/5 actually says, this is really 4 is a whole number plus 3/5 more. So the only part that we actually change to a decimal is the fraction. Okay, so that's all we're going to change. Okay, so this one, we're just going to write the 4 down. And 4 and 3/5, the and tells us where the decimal goes. And then we go to the side and we actually change 3/5 to a decimal. So 5 doesn't go into 3, so we add a decimal, bring the decimal up, add a 0. 5 goes into 30 6 times. We subtract, we get a remainder of 0. So this decimal and this decimal are the same one. So 4 3/5 would be 4.6 for our answer. Okay. 3 5/9, the same thing. The 3 is a whole number, so it's going to stay a whole number no matter what. And now we change the 5/9 into a decimal. So 9 doesn't go into 5. Add a decimal, bring it up, add a 0. 9 goes into 50 5 times. 5 times 9 is 45. We subtract, we get 5 left over. Add a 0, bring it down. 9 goes into 50 5 times, 45. And you'll notice the pattern, it continues. So this decimal and this decimal are the same one. So we write the 5 down, and the 5, notice it's repeating, it just keeps going. So we put a bar just over the 5. So how do we change a fraction to a decimal? We simply divide. If you have a mixed number, you just put the whole number in the front.